9 things I would tell my younger self about being an entrepreneur. So hindsight is 2020. We all know that, right? If we could look back across our lives, we could identify bad decisions we made, mistakes we made, problems we had, and we'd be able to minimize all those situations. And we could also look at all the good stuff that we did, and we'd be able to maximize those too. And so that would be fantastic. But obviously, it's not a reality. We don't live in a world where we can go back in time. It's not Hogwarts or Harry Potter or anything like that. So we all learn stuff throughout the course of our lives that we wish we knew earlier. And this is true in our personal lives. You know, we learn things as parents that we wish we knew younger. We learn things as, colleagues or employees or friends, or, significant others, romantic partners, whatever. We learn things through the experience of life. And some of the lessons that we learn through the struggle and, through the grief are, there's value in that because it does make us better at what we're doing. It gets us closer to where we want to be and further away from where we don't want to be. But obviously, because we all learn stuff that we wish we knew earlier, some of those lessons and some of those hard knocks that we go through, it's okay, but wouldn't it be better sometimes if we could just avoid that? If we could avoid it in the first place, that would be a great, thing to be able to do. And so none of us are going to be able to avoid all of the frustration, the heartache, the disappointment, the failure, whatever that we're going to go through in our life, but we can minimize it. And if we minimize that and we maximize the good stuff, it gives us a higher quality of life. It just makes total logical sense. So obviously we can't go back. But what we can do is we can help others who are earlier on the journey than we are. Because if somebody has already gone through something that now we're going through or want to go through, their experience has left us clues. Their experience has left us tips and shown light on mistakes and issues and problems and ways to do things in the best possible way and the worst. And so if we study that, we can learn from that. And that's true of every walk of life. Whether we're an athlete, whether we're a business person, whether we're a parent, no matter what it is that we're trying to do, if we're trying to build a garden, there's someone who's made every mistake on the planet. So if we follow other people that have built gardens successfully and we learn from them the mistakes that they've made, then obviously it gives us a better chance to make fewer of those mistakes and have a better experience with the whole thing. And that's exactly what I hope to do from the entrepreneurial standpoint. I've been an entrepreneur for 20 plus years, essentially. And in my current role, I guess you could say, probably the last 17 years or so. And I've learned a lot throughout that time. And some of the lessons that I've learned are things that I got right out of the gate. They're things that were inherent in me or things that I believed from the start that I still believe because they've borne themselves out. There are a lot of things that I believed in the beginning that I've discarded, I no longer believe. And then there are things that I had no idea about or I took for granted or I didn't realize how important they were until after. And once I made the mistakes and once I had the struggles and the hard times, then I recognized the value. And so while everyone's journey is different, I want to share 9 things that I believe are totally true. And no matter where we are in our entrepreneurial journey, are things that we could definitely take to heart and they will help us achieve greater success with less frustration and struggle. So as they say, take what you want, take what you like, leave the rest, and hopefully some of this will be able to help you. So the first thing that I've learned and that I really believe is true, and I sort of knew it from the beginning, but I didn't always follow it, is to only do it if you love it. The idea of being an entrepreneur has a lot of appeal. It has this sort of shiny object syndrome where people get excited about the idea of being their own boss, of wanting to make their own rules, and all of those kinds of things. And it's particularly pronounced if we're unhappy in our current situation. So if we're working at a job and we think our boss is a tyrant, we hate the job, we're not making enough money, we have financial struggles, any of these other kinds of things, that's going to drive us more toward entrepreneurship. But those in and of themselves are not reasons to become an entrepreneur. It's really important to understand, do we really have this in our DNA? And I'm going to share a couple more tips in a few minutes that will help you really flesh that out. But if we don't really have that in our DNA and it's not part of who we are, while it might be tempting and it might be a great diversion, it's probably not the right thing for us. So we only want to do it if we love it. We don't have to be in love necessarily with entrepreneurship in and of itself. But whatever our business idea is, has to be something that we're not doing it because it feels like an escape, because that will be short term and likely not succeed. We're doing it because it's something that we would rather do. And one way that you can tell if it's something that you love is it's something that you naturally gravitate toward if there's no money involved. If they're hobbies, they're interests, they're things that you would do anyway, that you just naturally sort of geek out when you think about them because you just love it. That's a good sign if you feel that way. If it's something that if you had all the money in the world and you could snap your fingers like a genie and make all of your financial concerns disappear forever, and all you had to do in your life is exactly what you wanted to do, if the business or the entrepreneurial venture you're thinking of would be that thing, you're in the right place. So only do it if you love it. I think that's a really important point. And we may morph that idea. So we may start off and we may love what we're doing, and then we may not love it anymore and we may shift. That's okay. But when we start it, we need to be in love with it. We need to want to do it with everything that we've got, because otherwise the challenges we're going to face are going to knock us out. The second thing is to have a compelling why. And this is connected to the first one, but it's a little bit different. We want to love what we're doing, but we also want to have a burning reason why. For me, it was really simple. I was at graduate school. I was working full-time, raising a family. I had all these things going on at once. And I had called home one night from in the city where I was at school on my break between classes. So it's like 7:30. I was in class till about 9 o'clock at night after working. And then I had to train back home. And my wife was reading our older son a bedtime story. And I got sort of this empty feeling because I felt like, oh, that's something I'm going to miss all the time if I go into consulting, which is the career I was going to pursue. And I'm not going to be there for any of these moments. I'm going to be creating a nice lifestyle. I'm going to make a lot of money, but I'm not going to be there to enjoy it. And I really wanted to be more involved. So for me, that was really the compelling why. And that was something that it always drove me, even in my darkest times. I knew I had to make it work because I wanted to be able to be that present in the situation. So it isn't for the half committed. If we don't have a compelling why for why we're doing it, we're also going to, when we hit struggle, when times are good, it's easy to keep going. When we hit struggle, we're going to want to give up. And so if we have a compelling why, we can always go back to that. It will drive us forward even when we're struggling. The third thing is to get experience from a career, from mentors, from other entrepreneurs before starting. Now, this is something I didn't really do. And it's one of the biggest mistakes that I can point to in my own career because I had so much to learn. I had so little knowledge about what I was doing that even though I'm pretty resourceful, I'm hardworking, I'm smart enough to be able to learn the stuff I need to learn, I took a lot of bumps and bruises. It took me a lot longer to get to where I wanted to be. And there were a lot of issues along the way that had I had a foundation in being involved in a company where I saw everything working the right way and then went off and did that, I would have been much more successful. A lot of the most successful entrepreneurs that have success, relatively early on, so they're not in a 15-year struggle, are people that left sort of a corporate job or a business, or they had a connection with another entrepreneur or a mentor who had already done this that helped them along the way. So they already had this entire mind frame of what this needs to look like to be successful. And when we come into it from that perspective, we have a lot more that we're going to be able to do and a lot fewer mistakes because we already know what it's supposed to look like. When we start with a blank canvas, it's exciting, but it's also nerve-wracking, it's overwhelming, and it's very, very easy to make lots of mistakes. And so if we don't want to have a career or we don't like our job, so we're not going to go into that, that's understandable. But in that case, we want to then find a mentor who's built a successful business and get to know them, even if it's another industry. So we have somebody we can reach out to. Find out how they made it work. What did they do? for this to be successful? What are their 9 tips that they would tell you their younger self, right? And figure that stuff out in advance, or other entrepreneurs, and sort of build a network of that or whatever before we start. If we do that, we're going to have a much, much better chance of success. The fourth thing that we want to do is we want to know our strengths and weaknesses. Look, we all have strengths and weaknesses. Some of the greatest strengths as entrepreneurs can also be our greatest weaknesses in other elements of entrepreneurship. Steve Jobs was a visionary. And so he was, by all counts, brilliant in the visionary element of what he did. There were a lot of things that he did that weren't very good. They were actually subpar. The way he treated some people, the ways, he handled some other things. And so as an actual manager, I don't think he was nearly as successful as he was as an entrepreneur or visionary. And yet, this is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in history. So he had weaknesses. So the point is, we all have strengths and weaknesses. Instead of trying to hide from it or pretend we don't have it, it's better to understand it, come to terms with it, and recognize where our weaknesses are. So if those weaknesses happen to be in jugular areas of the business, what we could do is we can go out and get the help that we need. Even if it's just an outsourcer or a mentor or some sort of person who could be an advisor for us. We don't necessarily need to hire somebody or partner with somebody, although that can be a good idea if we have complementary skill sets. But we need to recognize what we're good at and accentuate and focus on that. And we need to find what we're not good at. And if that stuff is critical to the business, we've got to find ways to work around that so it doesn't hinder us or stop us in our tracks. The fifth thing is to embrace obstacles, setbacks, anxiety, stress, lack of security, and the financial roller coaster that we're going to endure. Very few cases, unless you come from a wealthy background where your parents are financing it, and you cashed out in another career, and now you have this nest egg or you have a trust fund or something. In those cases, you can probably table this one or push it all the way to the back of the list because it's not going to be as important for you. But if you're somebody who is paycheck to paycheck, if you are the breadwinner for the family, if your livelihood and ability to put food on the table and a roof over your head has to do with your ability to build this business, then you just have to get comfortable with this, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because there will be great times when everything's easy and you're working less than you need to make a lot more money and you're feeling like you're the best. I mean, you just crushed this. Look what a brilliant entrepreneur you are. And then there are days where everything seems to fall apart. You're working twice as hard as everybody else. They're planning their family vacations. You're worried about being able to, pay the mortgage at the end of the month. And it goes on and on and on like that. It's an absolute roller coaster of emotions, stress, anxiety, setbacks, obstacles, all that stuff is all bundled together. So unless you have total financial security independent of what you're doing, you just have to be aware and embrace it. It's important not to be naive and to think, well, we'll just make profit from day one. That scenario you don't need to prepare for. Because if you're lucky enough to be in that scenario, and that's not many people, but if you're lucky enough to be in that scenario, then congratulations for one, and for two, you don't need to worry about any of this. But we need to plan for the worst case scenario, not the best, because the best is easy to handle. It's what happens when it hits the fan, so to speak. What are we going to do? And so these are the things that we need to be prepared for. So we just need to gear up, understand they're part of the package, and be okay with that. It doesn't make us bad or failures or, the only one. If it happens to us, it happens to all of us. I just got off the phone the other day with an entrepreneur who I said to him, I talk to a lot of people, and when they start off businesses, they seem to have this idea that, I'm going to be my own boss and it's great. He goes, no, he goes, it's terrifying. He goes, it's terrifying. 1 month, my wife is asking me for a check for $3,000 to remodel something. He's like, here you go. He's like, the next month, I'm like, the car payment's due in 2 days. Let me get a couple more things done. And he said, it's terror, start to finish. He goes, but if you like it and it's what you want to do and you love it, then you go all in on that. So not trying to scare anybody, Just trying to be realistic and make sure that we understand that that is part of the package. The sixth thing is don't fly solo. This was one of my biggest mistakes. If I could rewind all those years, the number one thing I would do is I wouldn't fly solo. Now, this doesn't mean you need to have a partner in your business. It doesn't mean you can't own a solopreneurship. You can, but you don't want to be alone. So if you're the only owner and the only person working on it, and by the way, it seems to track that 2-person and 3-person businesses have a higher chance of success because you have so many more people in that. But they also can, come across some pretty major problems and disagreements. So you got to do with whatever's right for you. But if you are a solopreneur, as I am, then you want to find a mentor. You want to find a mastermind group. You want to find other entrepreneurs who understand your plight, your issues, your challenges, the joys of this, the terrors of this, and everything in between. And you want to stay connected to that group. There will be times where it feels unnecessary and you don't need it, but there will be times where you will be thankful to have it because it will help you shortcut any of the problems you're having. It'll help you jump over some of the obstacles. It'll help you make sure you feel like you're not alone, and it will help you get to where you're going a lot faster and easier. It also creates a lot of opportunities for synergy because one mind is not ever going to be as good as a bunch working in concert on the same issues. The seventh thing is to keep one eye on the horizon and the other on the business. There's a tendency, once we put out our shingle and we start, to focus completely on the business. We got our head down, we're going, it's awesome. Like we're working our tail off, things are going well, everything's moving right. Then all of a sudden, something went wrong and I didn't realize, that was some economic issue. That was some new regulation that was passed. That was some new disruptive technology we weren't aware of. If we get caught unaware because our head has both eyes down in our business, we can't see the horizon, we don't know what's going on, that is very dangerous. We want to always have one eye on that. We need to work our tail off in the business, but we've got to have one eye up on the horizon so we get a sense of what's around us. We get a sense of what's coming, what changes are coming, what industry trends are happening, so we can do what we need to do to make sure we're keeping ourselves in the most competitive light possible, but also to make sure that we recognize opportunities and we grab them when they're there. We don't want to miss out on an opportunity because our head was down when we could have crushed something and exploded our business. So we want to be aware for all of those reasons. The eighth thing is to track, analyze, adjust, and adapt. No matter what business we're in, no matter what industry, no matter how good things are going at any given time, we have to be tracking our results so we know what we're getting for what we're doing. Then we have to analyze those results. We have to look with an analytical mind to recognize trends, opportunities, threats, issues, what's working, what's not working. Are things trending up? Are they trending down? Is it getting, weaker or stronger in the market? How is our business doing overall? And I don't just mean sales and expenses. I mean anything and everything that we're doing in our marketing, in our, it takes a little bit of time, effort, and thought to get analytics set up initially. But once we've got them set up, it's very easy to just keep looking at them. And once we analyze, we can recognize things before they become dire. We can also recognize things that are opportunities maybe before our competition recognizes them. So we can adjust, we can adapt, we can take advantage of all that stuff and make sure that we keep ourselves in the most profitable and competitive position possible. And the ninth thing is, and I actually think this is really important too, and I have to remind myself of this sometimes, keep a sense of humor, levity, and have fun. At the end of the day, despite the stress, despite the work, despite the effort, and how many obstacles there are going to be, I know it sounds like I'm painting this doom and gloom picture, but I'm not really. I just know that people come into it with a naturally optimistic bent. And that's fine and that's great. You need optimism to be successful. At the same time, if you're optimistic to a point, that you are not recognizing reality for what it is, that's where it becomes dangerous. But we do want to keep a sense of humor. We want to laugh. We want to find times to let go, to unplug. We want to be, make levity, make light of things. Sometimes we could joke about stuff and ultimately have fun. Do some stuff that refills our tank and makes us feel good about who we are, what we're doing, and all that kind of stuff. So those are 9 things that I think are vitally important. And if I were starting over as an entrepreneur, there are 9 things that I would want to know. And I would start my business and my entrepreneurial career with those 9 in mind and take them all in account as I went forward. So the takeaway here is that we all have different journeys, but there are some universal elements to being an entrepreneur that are inescapable. We don't need to be afraid to start a business, but we do need to be prepared and we do need to be realistic. If we do things the right way, the path is easier, straighter, and a lot more fun. We only live once, so it's important to do what we want and reach for our goals, but we also want to enjoy the ride.